So, with all the recent news stories about Donald Trump and the fire hose of truth spraying him square in the face, I thought this would be a good opportunity to teach people about narcissistic personality disorder. Since Donald Trump is literally the poster boy for the disorder, I wanted to use him as an example to teach people about narcissism because it can be a difficult concept to grasp. So, I want to start with Ukraine and how Donald Trump made the free will decision to suspend military aid so that he could get dirt on Joe Biden's son from the Ukraine government. And this isn't only self-interest, but this is exactly the way a narcissist's mind works. Well, I'm not just going to give you something. What's in it for me? What do I get out of it? It's like, that's actually the way a narcissist works. I know there were other reasons for him suspending aid, but you can see the narcissism behind it, where it's just like, well, I'm not just going to give you it. What do I get in return? What's in it for me? That's exactly the way a narcissist thinks. So I'm not surprised this happened. Another thing is with Syria, he decided to pull U.S. troops out of Syria, and so the Kurds weren't protected, and so people were being tortured and killed. And his response was unapologetic and apathetic, where he just said, where is the agreement that says we have to stay in the Middle East for the rest of humanity? See how there's like no empathy there? People are suffering and dying and there's just like no empathy there at all whatsoever. It's because narcissists don't have empathy. He doesn't care about the Kurds. He doesn't have any empathy. He's a narcissist. So whereas other normal people look at him who have empathy and wonder like where it is, it's like, well, he doesn't have any. Like, don't attribute this, aspect to him. It's not there. You're trying to get blood from a turnip. So that's one thing that I think people need to come to accept, is that he doesn't have any empathy. That's part of being a narcissist. Later, Trump decides to keep some of the U.S. troops in Syria to, quote, protect the oil and not the Kurds. That's great. Later, when he's referring to the ISIS fighters detained by the Kurds, he said, I'm the one that did the capturing. So that's the showboating, braggadocio, egoic statements where he's really good at self-complimenting. Every other statement is just a compliment and bragging and just selling himself to people, and just has this high, inflated sense of self-importance and this high opinion of himself that he wants other people to adopt. So every other sentence is a compliment when he's speaking. I also wanted to talk about Elijah Cummings. In the past, Donald Trump has ripped on him on Twitter, saying that he's a brutal bully for shouting at Border Patrol. He called him a racist, called Baltimore rat-infested. And then after Elijah Cummings' recent passing, Donald Trump changed his tune and said, my warmest condolences to the family and many friends of Congressman Elijah Cummings. Well, you could say it's like, oh, well, he passed, so now Donald Trump's trying to be the bigger person, but that's just his ego. It's just like, oh, now I look bad. Oh, I better turn this around. I look bad. That's also his ego. So he just looks really hypocritical and just two-faced and inauthentic at this point, but whatever. I also wanted to bring up his ego with regards to national security. He's very poor at foreign relations and maintaining those relationships because his ego is so big. So, other world leaders view that as a weakness, and, and then he also like ticks off other world leaders where it's like, God, that guy's like, so full of himself and whatever. Well, he's like rubbing people the wrong way, etc. Well, his ego, also makes us vulnerable to nuclear war as a country. So his ego and his narcissism makes us vulnerable to, people like Kim Jong-Un, where it's just inviting nuclear war and just inviting us to get blown up. So that's another aspect of narcissism, is it compromises national security for the United States. So having a president with narcissistic personality disorder is a really big deal. It's not something that just should be dismissed, like, oh, well, it's like, no, this is a big deal. So the Divine calls Donald Trump a historical error and said that it all begins and ends with his ego, where he made the egoic decision to run for president. It wasn't coming from his heart. So it ends with his ego, where his name is mud. So unfortunately, that's the lesson Donald Trump needs to learn, is when you let your ego drive all of your decisions, doesn't work out to your highest good. But a fraudulent election results in a fraudulent president. So the divine doesn't acknowledge him, says his power is an illusion, and doesn't consider him to be number 45. And he doesn't even consider, November 2016 to be an election. He puts election in quotes. And he says, why not give the people a real election? So the divine doesn't even acknowledge the election or Donald Trump as president. So again, when I see Donald Trump's narcissism shining, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to teach people about it. The no empathy, the ego, the showboating. It's all about him. What's in it for me? Blah, blah, blah. Like, this is prime narcissistic personality disorder. So I wanted people to kind of take a closer look at it so they could see this as kind of a learning opportunity about the disorder and how it works. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, when I look at Donald Trump's soul and what we're learning about him, and then I look at the Alec Baldwin Saturday Night Live skits, all I can think is, yeah, those are pretty accurate. And in the meantime, take care and be well. Thank you.